Okay, hello, welcome everybody to another webinar of our digital project practice series. If you haven't attended one of our amazing webinars, just let me introduce you very quickly. Everything is based on our digital project practice series. And it's all about getting ideas into impact. It's based on our book where our three speakers for today also contributed a chapter. We have, meanwhile, actually three books in the series. We have Digital Project Practice, Managing Innovation and Change. We have Digital Project Practice for New Work and Industry 4. And we have digital project practice for banking and fintech. And that is that one that we are elaborating today a little more about. So if you are tempted to know more and if you want to learn what goes beyond that was said today, then you are more than welcome to order the book. I've convinced the publisher to give us also a generous 20% discount. I put the code in the chat box if you are interested in that. I'd also like to invite you to join our group on LinkedIn, that you stay in touch and maybe you have some questions that are not answered today or that you just when you think after the event. So please join our group on LinkedIn. But that's already all I have to say for today, besides a very warm welcome to our speakers. Today we have Dr. Ruffin, Professor Phillipa, and Dr. Anita, Zhao from the UK. And good afternoon in the UK, good evening Bangkok, good day wherever you are. And I will hand over to you to the topic Buy Now, Pay Later, Consumer Spending Reframed.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for that generous welcome. I'm now trying to work out how to share my screen, so that's always good. I'm hoping I'm going to do this right, and let me know, colleagues, if that seems to have worked.
Yes.
Fabulous,
yes.
Fabulous. Great, thank you. So I've got the exciting job of driving the PowerPoint, yeah? Always delegate everything else to everyone else and make sure you've got the least important job, which is driving the PowerPoint. So we've split up this talk between the three of us. And Anita, I think you're kindly going to kick us off. So let me know when you want me to click and drive us on.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tobias, from all of us, and also the lovely invite to get us engaged again, to this important talk. So thank you very much for the opportunity. We're going to run through a very quick introduction. I thought that I'm going to spend 14 minutes out of the presentation time to introduce each of my lovely colleagues. So I've got Phillipa and Ruffin here. They both are very inspiring and leaders, as well as the champions in the area that we do the research upon, and I'm really delighted that we are able to do this talk together today. So bring you through or take you through some of the findings that we found in the literature, as well as maybe some of the questions that we face that we might not necessarily come up with an answer, but would love to hear your views and also to share those findings and questions with you as well. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we're going to look at Buy Now, Pay Later, which I think, when I looked at it several years ago, I thought, this is absolutely outside of my lifestyle, not my age, generation type of thing. Buy Now, Pay Later, what, is this particular product. So Buy Now, Pay Later is essentially a very popular scheme, financial schemes to help individuals, particularly younger generations, to cope with their purchase as well as their financial management. It's a third-party short-term credit agreement based on, a particular type of amount of funds that would be available to an individual, say a consumer, a retailer, and also the scheme provider. And usually in this case could be a fintech company, could be any provider that would be interested in liaising and also bridging those gaps. Buy now, pay later is particularly new, popular among younger generations. That's one of the reasons why I think that I'm in the wrong stream of research, if you like, and it gains a huge amount of attention, not necessarily just from users' point of view, retailers' point of view, but also at the same time, policymakers as well as the service providers. So buy now pay later has witnessed a huge, rapid growth across the globe. Particularly, a recent report by Statista has reported that it actually has gained about 5% of the e-commerce transaction volume globally increase. So it's actually quite a phenomenon, on its own. Now, looking into the UK also, this is something that is, again, very trendy, new, innovative, and also very much gaining the younger generation's popularity. And it also has topped the UK to become one of the highest users, adopters of buy now pay later within Europe. So any of those growth of the sector, the outlook of the sector is very positive, and it brings us to the next the marketplace, how it has been able to enjoy the growth and also the popularity among the users, etc. Now, from a consumer's point of view, this is rather easy and also convenient piece of payment methods. You could download an app onto your smartphones. You could also see buy now pay later at checkout in a store or online, etc. It's almost everywhere. I was very surprised to see that the other day when I was checking something online, it's everywhere that you could see. The process of using it, it is in terms of from the user's point of view, is rather low barrier. So it's convenient to use, just several clicks that it would take you to the scheme that you would need, the funding that you would need to finish your purchase, your consumption. So that really gets us to think about whether we should see buy now pay later as an app, as a company provider, as a scheme, or as a more ecosystem, more as a platform to increase the purchase consumption experiences. And that brings us to the next finding. Next slide, please, Phillipa, if that's okay. So unfortunately, that when we are trying to review the literature, there isn't too much around buy now pay later itself. There is an ongoing increasing amount of attention from media, and also a bit more volume in the research outlets such as journal articles. When we are trying to divide the literature and looked at the the good sides, the bad sides of the consumption from different roles or players' point of view, then from perhaps the consumer's point of view, is first of all, it's not just about convenience to use. It's not just about an alternative to credit card or debit card or any traditional payment method that you would think about. It also reshaping their approach to spending, and this is something quite different from the literature around credit card usage. However, buy now pay later is often quite ill understood. So quite a lot of consumers not necessarily see these as a credit alternative. They might think this is my future money. I'm just borrowing my own money to purchase the product now. So this kind of understanding is actually quite limited and rather narrow-minded in a way. We also find out that retailers are reframing, changing, defining their customer relationships. So in the past, that retailers possibly could be in a dominant approach, that when they can have full access to the consumers, and nowadays they are having this bridge in the middle, buy now pay later providers such as Klarna, for instance. They are also reshaping, reinventing the role of consumers' payment services, and whether these particular ecosystem should be seen as more like a platform that involves a lot of impulse purchase, sales promotions, and any of those elements, stimuli that could amplify impulse buying. And we find out that some research beginning to suggest that particular trend in the literature. So consumers, retailers, as well as providers from the buy now pay later provision point of view, we are in the, in a sort of, a fluid platform, and also to understand how this marketplace is operating, is shaping the new dynamics as well as the practices that we would need to look into. The fourth perhaps aspect that we hadn't touched too much yet is the regulators' point of view. So policymakers unfortunately are aware of the unregulated features of buy now pay later, the potential greater risks that users such as consumers, retailers potentially could involve in terms of their indebtedness, and also in terms of the information sharing, how to use information, etc. So the overwhelming, I think, finding from the literature is that the sector itself, not necessarily just from the UK, but across the globe, many countries, but how buy now pay later are actually operating in an unregulated context. So that brings us to a lot more headaches in terms of questioning to what extent consumers are protected, and are protected well enough, and also by whom, and what sort of the processes that we could inform, and we could also help them to improve their informed decision makings. And from that point, and I think that I could pass the ball to my next colleague, maybe Phillipa or Ruffin, to continue the lovely discussion with you. Thank you.
I think I'm picking up the baton, Anita. So if we start to think about BNPL in the way that Anita's outlined, one of the things that struck us when we were considering it is that BNPL providers, particularly companies like Klarna, have really shifted the goalposts of financial service. So if we look at this digital consumption ecosystem that Anita has started to outline, the providers are creating sophisticated online spaces. They are seductive. They look nothing like your traditional financial service provider. You go in there, it's all pink. There is very little about financial services. There's a heck of a lot about brands, about spending, about buying, about offers, about vouchers, about things that are all your interest areas, things that are important to you. And in a way, buy now, pay later sits behind this. So it really seems as if somebody like Klarna is much more of that online department store. Now, that's quite a different space to our traditional credit providers, retail banks, etc. They haven't traditionally put themselves into this space. So what they're creating is this enclosure. They are capturing the consumer, and they are not only offering them the means to purchase, but they are curating what to buy. They are starting to assemble different configurations of brands. And of course, the retailers are paying for that privilege. So in a way, they are as much Klarna's customers, and perhaps the more important customer to Klarna than the consumers. So those retailers are offering up preferential services, giving special discounts, offering particular product lines. So the consumer enters this space, this curated and managed and tailored location. And what they're seeing is the ability to capture in that space browsing history. So these financial service providers are suddenly capturing a lot more data. It's not just about the classic financial service data pack, but we're also thinking about what they're looking at, how long they're looking at it for, which retailers they're starting to prefer, which particular types of approach, advertising, promotional nudge is getting these consumers to actually engage. We're also very interested because often BNPL providers are thinking about managing retailer transactions and are taking a much more active part in returns. We hear from the consumers that we've surveyed and spoken with that they love BNPL because it gives them some real flexibility. So I can buy a product, I opt for the 30 day payment. Well, that's not really different to a credit card. But if I opt for the 3 monthly or whatever it is split payment system, I'm only paying a portion to gain access to those goods. So we see customers actually buying in quantity. I don't know what size to buy. I've never bought from this retailer before. What the heck? I'm putting it on BNPL. I'll try 3 sizes, knowing that I can send it back, but I'll only be paying a third. And the BNPL provider will take out the hassle of the return of the money. They'll simply do that. It's a really slick operation. So they're much more embedded into the retailer space. Obviously, they're getting capturing information about purchase timing and quantities, thinking about how close is it to certain times of the month, thinking about when things happen, how maybe they're related to people's financial management. Also, I'm providing, as a BNPL operator, an app. The app is going to be helping you manage your payments. So it's not just like a statement that aggregates everything. Each single agreement gives you information. You can see when your next payment's coming up. You can snooze a payment. You can think about paying off early if that's advantageous to you. You can look at what line is coming out at which point in the month. So you can really, in a sophisticated manner, manage your cash flow. And again, I'm capturing all of that information. I'm also getting data on your repayments. Do you pay on time? Do you pay in full? Do you prefer to pay off early? Which particular scheme that I offer do you want to take up? Do you offer a mix of those schemes in your sort of practice as a consumer? Do you use some of the deferred payments for 30 days? Do you offer the split schemes? What happens when? The other thing that's also quite different is that many of the BNPL providers are actively participating in having very active social media accounts. So I might be taking paid for social media, but I'm also looking to garner organic comment. I'm looking to manage influencers. I'm thinking about how this connects to buying behavior and having influencers who perhaps are thinking about fashion or whether it be holidays. I'm actually managing this much more as a shopping experience than as a simple credit. So what that means for the consumer is potentially constrained choice. So this company is starting now to create this enclosed space and, in essence, bringing my world in. I'm relying on them to find me the best offers, to support and present for me the best brands or products for my particular spending. And the reason that they're able to do this is because of an increase in the digital sense-making tools available to them. So their ability to analyze these large data sets enables them to come up with hyper-personalized targeting. Now, that could be seen as a real positive boon. It might save me time. It makes my life simpler. This is easy. It's smooth, as our friends at Klarna would have it. But equally, I'm not seeing as much. I'm not finding things that are perhaps unusual, etc. And that could be seen as a poor thing. Also, one of the interesting things is that potentially I'm also coming across smaller retailers. So whilst the big retailers might pay a lot more to have their brands highlighted, things like BNPL providers are often working with small brands that often wouldn't get much traction from your traditional financial services provider. So there's an interesting interplay here. We can see this as a benefit, a positive life-supporting activity, or we can think about this as potentially making our world smaller and limiting our choice, or at least giving over partial control of our choice to a third party as a consumer. Clearly, there are big implications for retailers. How many BNPL partners should we work with? Who should we in essence, privileges our BNPL partner. In terms of regulators, well, what does this mean? Not only thinking from a financial services, but a markets and competition perspective, thinking about this as advertising and promotion. These are not necessarily before coming together in one space, but these BNPL providers are drawing all of this together and working very effectively to manage it. So what does that mean? Well, it means that BNPL is embedded in a world of algorithms. And rather than seeing algorithms as purely technical, perhaps it's helping us understand them as cultural objects. These are not just things that are in essence programmed, but they're also about our practices. We feed the algorithm as much as the algorithm feeds us. So we need to think about our activities, the things that are going on from the retailers, from the consumers, as feeding the BNPL algorithms. So they're being blended together. These both technical and non-technical concerns are coming together in this enclosed space. And that makes them particularly exciting because you can start to see that we are reframing traditional consumption patterns. And maybe we're going to become much more attached to our BNPL providers than we are to a specific brand or a particular retailer. That's quite a big shift. Most consumers, if you ask them about their attachment to their financial services providers, they would want trust, they would want security, they would want sort of authenticity, privacy, all of the things that we would naturally attach to it. But here, the BNPL provider is also being reframed as somebody who might be offering innovation, fashion advice, lifestyle advice. So quite a different space. So culturally, they're becoming a very different type of financial service provider. So we can see these algorithms as being socially generative. They are creating patterns of social activity, and they are changing and reframing and reshaping the way that this ecosystem works. Some authors have suggested that this borders on what we might describe as surveillance capitalism. So what we're seeing is we're using this information and it's helping us really get a grip of what to do and therefore changing our offers to meet that. Knowing so much more about the consumer and the retailer is enabling us to make decisions that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. We've been let into their personal lives and their practices in a much more substantive fashion. It's also socially responsive. So these algorithms are also being affected by those practices, which may also have things impressed upon them. So, for example, in many contexts, we're going through a cost of living crisis. We're thinking about the implications of economic and political instability. And these will also feed in as people's perhaps budgetary frameworks are changed. So we've also got these networks of desire. So they are also within these perhaps restrained spaces, giving us offers, tempting us to do things that we might not necessarily do, perhaps in essence, nudging our behavior into specific directions. Some people would go even further, and they would say that what we're seeing is the forming of class distinctions, because what we've got in this space are people who understand and know and can operate, and others who, as Anita suggested, have very limited resources, financial literacy, and capabilities to manage this space. And actually, because this is in essence a space that is bringing them in this enclosed space, they may be trapped there. And even if they sort of think about things that they're hearing from outside that space, social media, comments from outside it, they may not be able to break out. And at that point, I'd like to click on to my next slide.
Thank you very much, Phillipa. I think that this whole stickiness is not only within the single platform that the BNPL providers provide or offer, but it actually extends also to our social realities, to our digital platforms, and basically then creates an assemblage. And what we can see and notice is that there are basically social media channels that try to educate the consumer, and this is basically found in 4 different approaches. The first one would be lifestyle. So what is it that basically BNPL can afford you to do, to buy, but equally maybe putting out a word of warning. Yeah, but equally, depending on the type of platform, whether this is a video or whether this is done by using imagery, is the whole idea of memes. Yeah, so generating little videos and multiplying and adding elements to it, and creating humorous and also sardonic communication around BNPL consumption. Equally, there might be especially merchants that do not necessarily promote a specific BN provider, so it's more implicit. Maybe they would have a hashtag, yeah, using the reference to a specific BNPL service name. But otherwise, it's more a question of promoting products and services through those channels. And then, of course, there's also something that we can see in this idea of FinTalk to provide financial advice, whether this is now a question of beware of over-indebtedness, or also a question of how to use BNPL responsibly. But equally, looking at those 4 streams, while there is variety, what they all do is, through hashtags and all the algorithms underneath it, create some sort of echo chambers and filter bubbles, which of course then have an impact on consumer behavior. And Phillipa, if you don't mind, I will just move to the next slide, because this is taken directly from the book chapter as well. If I can just start in the center, which is encapsulated by the dotted line, the consumer, as implicit in the previous slides already, is not only the subject, but also the object of BNPL consumptions and the algorithms. So basically we shape the algorithm, but the algorithm shapes our attitudes and behavior and vice versa. And there's a differential outcome offering this hyper targeted personalization. And this is in part due to the overlap or intersection of BN providers assemblage as retailers. Yeah, we basically curate offers, retailers and brands, and on the other hand we have the social media platforms which influences us either through organic or through paid media. And this is a space which is quite tricky and difficult to manage and oversee, because at the moment it is so fast paced that even financial marketing regulators have difficulties to catch up and to try to capture all the vulnerabilities that are involved in this space. But also thinking about whose regulation is it? Are we talking about banking? Are we talking about advertising? Because there has been regulations as well about how to advertise financial services. While it's not yet classified as a credit in a traditional sense, there's of course a question of how we can protect vulnerable customers, while at the same time I've seen that another colleague is in the room. If I can just use the idea of integrating resources properly, or basically leading to misintegration of resources, to use the idea of service marketing, and then of course thinking about the BNPL ecosystem, the different network of interconnected actors, whether this is the BN provider, the retailers, the social media platforms, the consumers. All this becomes very, very complex. And therefore, as a consequence, we have amplification of the implications as well. So the implications for the consumers. And as said, some are quite happy in the space and appreciate the desire that is basically created, fed and nurtured, versus others feel much more reluctant and maybe also cautious, and are much more aware of the data that need to be provided in order to make this ecosystem work. And this is where I want to start, because I'm also conscious of time. Yeah, so I'm happy then to, I think the next slide should be a thank you, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you so much for your time to listen. And yeah, I guess this is now where we start with Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much for your interesting presentation. And there were really a lot of interesting takes on, I guess. I quite liked also the idea to consider an algorithm as a cultural artifact. That really resonates to me. So I'd like to invite the audience to ask a question. Either raise your hand and unmute or type your question in the chat box. But before we the first questions drop in, maybe one question that gives kind of the link to the webinar that we had last week on embedded finance. You mentioned in your talk that maybe the buy now, pay later providers will be a kind of a point of association for the customers itself. Do you think this is in line with the idea of embedded finance, or are they part of the existing platforms, or is there both? What would be your take on this?
I think the short answer is it's going to be both. So I think they are part of the system, but equally, I think it is moving us into a very different space for financial services. And I think almost it's a warm up, because many customers have now become familiar, and a lot of the consumers that we've dealt with, younger consumers in the UK, are not particularly interested in traditional financial services products, particularly within the credit sphere. So they are looking for different ways and different means of considering their finances. This isn't to say that they all only think about credit. There are also issues around banking, saving, different sorts of investment vehicles. And actually, it's quite an interesting, sophisticated picture, moving from those that are very adept to those that have very little capacity and understanding at this point in time. So it's quite a nuanced position, but I think they're very much ready to move into very different spaces than many traditional consumers.
And you already mentioned younger consumers, and when we think a little bit also the title Consumer Spending Reframed, there's some discussion also from a critical perspective in terms of overspending maybe. What do you think about this?
So if you don't mind, I will take this.
Oh,
yeah, no, Anita,
go
okay, you go. Why don't you start and I will pick up?
That's a hard job, Ruffin. Thank you. I think that's a very, very interesting question. I think younger generations, when I think about the 20 or 30 years ago when I was younger, then I don't necessarily have got the experience or the need indeed to manage my personal finance, because I didn't need to do anything else other than spending, and that's what happens. And I guess with the younger generations, they are so tuned into your mobile phone. You do anything with your mobile. This is almost as an extra organ now, sorry, for my language, but we were not born with this, but we would not leave the home without these now. You would leave your house without your key, but not your mobile. And I think it's partially to do with the younger generation's exposure to their financial management experiences. It could also be to do with the education content program-wise, how effective they are to train our younger generations to become more confident and comfortable with their personal finances management. And I think there's a sort of a perceived lower level of financial literacy. So you could argue almost that the objective knowledge might not matter too much in this process if someone else holds a very strong attitude towards their confidence, skills, ability, techniques, to manage their own personal finances, that they will see a brighter future ahead of them, etc. So I think it's a very interesting question, and it's very much, I think, a quite a gray area, particularly when the protection is not, fully comprehensible yet. Ruffin, you might want to add on something on, or add, yeah, please.
Maybe just like one thing, and just like I think that everything that you said is absolutely valid. And if I may go a couple of steps back and also reflect on the starting point of our journey. I think that I, at least speaking for myself, I was quite surprised because I, of course, also had a certain assumption, which as a researcher I tried to put aside. But nevertheless, I mean, I entered in this whole project with my colleagues and thought, oh my God, this is really like a fly trap or honey trap, and enticing young people to overspending. And I think that with all the information that we have generated, insights we have generated so far, there might be an element for some consumers, but I also think that it is not black and white. Some might say, actually, it is really empowering me in a way that I have access to money that I usually don't have. It might be empowering because actually I don't really care what happens with my data as long as I have the benefit of getting a curated offer that is relevant to me and affords me to do whatever I want with my money. Or it's a question of affordance and empowerment in terms of I don't feel very literate, financially literate. And it's quite helpful to get reminders, to get updates, to get like indications as to when to snooze, or basically saying that, yeah, someone is there and holding hands. Oh, that sounds a bit not really that well, but you know, but still like being a companion throughout this whole like purchase process, if that makes sense. So I thought this was quite revealing and eye-opening, and also changed at least my perception of BNPL as a fintech product. And I also thought it was quite interesting that many consumers don't really understand that this is still a banking system behind it. And Klarna is basically being the biggest, but also one of the most proliferated brands, at least in our Western and European hemisphere, is to think about, you know, online, offline. It's basically a seamless consumption experience as well. No matter where you are with the application, it's really becoming omnipresent, and the omni-channel idea becomes really very strong. And understanding that that banks or that providers like Klarna work on a banking open source software to basically, as they say, disrupt banking. And this, I think, is where it links back to what Phillipa said earlier, that we are only at the beginning and getting a taste of what is actually happening and about to come. And even if the regulations will come, there will be already a motion in progress, that definitely will change the way we think about algorithms, algorithmic marketing, and AI, artificial intelligence more broadly.
Well, I think I was just going to add to that. You can see the power of it at the speed of adoption for other non fintech specialists in that space. So we saw BNPL move quite quickly from the initial sort of grouping. It's moved out to what I would call your standard financial service providers, but it's also been taken up by digital providers like PayPal. We've seen Apple go in and come out of this area, and other lenders in that space thinking about how they might operate. So I think it is having quite a big ripple effect, but I don't think it's going to be the last of these sort of more fluid forms of financing. I think we'll see other products in this space.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. Hi, this is Tura, graduated with a Master in Science Marketing from University of Gloucestershire this year. I'm reading and found out that Lay-by is no longer accepting new transactions, but customers have now been told by administrators FTI Consulting should continue to make payments as normal as if they took out credit with the firm before its collapse, which is updated on 25th June. Just one quick question. Is this kind of issue maybe a big challenge for buy now, pay later in the future? I think that reflects to the risk of the operator more than the risk to the consumer.
Absolutely. And I think it's also quite instrumental that Klarna have not really been profitable. So whilst they've taken a big chunk out of the market, and there is certainly been proliferation, there are issues about risk, there are issues, I think, about corporate readiness to take on the market. People have jumped in quite quickly and are finding now it's a difficult operating space because, again, there was so many opportunities and competitors. And I think we will see, as we often do, this mushrooming and then this collapsing in, and we'll probably be left with a core number of people. But I don't think it's been an easy space. And I think for people like Klarna, there's been a heck of a lot of investment to build relationships. So we think about the financial services sort of risk, but I also think if you're trying to operate that sort of broader consumption platform model, there's risk in terms of the retailers building relationships and the investment that you've got to put into that space as well. So I do think we're going to see continued fallout of varied operators, and I think regulation will only sort of accelerate that process.
Do you think the role of big tech in this context might be they're entering that field, or is this more something like new form of fintech companies take over?
Shall I try this start? Just to share a news, and then you can always chip in, etc. I think it's again a very good question, because I think big companies such as PayPal, Apple, etc., that they have been in the market, and Apple particularly was in the market since last year. But within just a year, they last Tuesday had decided already to withdraw Apple Pay Later from the US market. So it literally, yes, the statement itself doesn't tell you exactly what has triggered the process of withdrawal, but there are numbers of suspicions, including things such as challenges of operating in such a complex system platform-wise, and also the investment that would be needed to smooth the process, and also other parties' relationships being involved in this complexity, fluid type of dynamic marketplace. And again, the unregulated nature of buy now pay later marketplace also could have heightened the process of the decision of the withdrawal. So I think that you potentially could see that there could be big sharks being left behind in the pool and continue to do their sort of businesses and the provision to the services provisions to the consumers. But you also will see that perhaps there could be more risks being exposed. So I think at the moment that we perhaps focus quite a lot from regulating's point of view, from users' point of view, consumers' point of view, less so was the retailers changing position, as well as how other parties might be affected in the process. I don't know whether Ruffin, yeah.
Yeah, just like back to the original question that you had, Tura, with the investments, it triggered me to think about Spotify, because Spotify for me is also quite interesting phenomenon, because it's a platform, it's about music, and it's not the most profitable platform, isn't it? So they've really struggled to generate net profit sustainably, or basically to start with the process in general. Nevertheless, there is a lot of investment there, because there is some sort of belief in what the product actually is. And if I think about BNPL, while it hasn't been launched only like 3 years ago, I think it was still coincidental with COVID. It was coincidental also with the cost of living crisis, especially in the United Kingdom. It will be quite interesting to see how it develops, and why we might see some sort of consolidation, because some brands might find it more difficult to deal with the market and the market dynamics. Others might say, actually, no, we have the investors and we are the market leaders, and this gives us a advantage and competitive advantage as well. And I also believe that moving away a little bit from BNPL as a context, I think what it shows is the way we use platforms in general. So whether this is Spotify, whether this is BNPL, whether this is ClearPie, etc., I think that it all relies on the algorithms that are behind it to basically generate insights. And while we, again, create the need of desire, we also have, on the other hand, the surveillance capital. And I think that this is where the tension comes in quite significantly, and raises important questions moving forward, how these technologies are being used responsibly. and sustainably as well.
I see.
Tobias,
Yes.
sorry, I was just going to say, the other thing that we don't really have a grip on at the minute is the business to business use of buy now, pay later. So we've seen this bubble and this sort of ballooning of it in the consumer market, but other providers are now entering into the business to business space specifically, particularly looking at the plethora of small to medium-sized enterprises that are the engines of economies. And I think that's going to be another interesting space, whether we'll have movement of what we've seen in the consumption market into that space, or whether we will have fintech specialists who are much more aligned with some of the issues around supply chain management particularly, and the sort of interlock between financial technology and supply chain management there. And I think that's actually going to be one of the most exciting and interesting spaces where we might see development over the next few years. And I think we're just in the very early stages of that.
Yeah. Maybe as a final question, where do you think are the opportunities? I think you mentioned in your talk that it might be good for smaller companies to use buy now, pay later providers as a platform. Could this be an opportunity? And are there some others where you think that would be of good use?
So I think that is going to be also one of the growth markets, particularly where you're looking at the interlock between things like social media and BNPL. So obviously we've seen a rise of social media in terms of selling on social media. And again, that interlock is quite an interesting space. Because what you've got is the proliferation of individuals as potentially salespeople. You're thinking about this. So I'm not thinking necessarily Etsy, but I'm thinking more about people selling on conventional social media. And actually, this is quite an interesting space for them because they wouldn't normally be able to access this type of opportunity, which is going to extend their reach, particularly if they're offering something that is more bespoke or tailored, that's going to have a higher price tag. So I think that's going to be an interesting, again, overlap space where those BNPL providers who master that social media space at a number of levels will perhaps have some real opportunities. I don't know what my colleagues think.
I agree with you. I think that's going to be potentially some opportunities of there for those who are cautious and also understanding comprehensively, how they were, coming up with their informed decisions, and from the seller's point of view, from the retailer's point of view, they would be able to reach out, to a group of consumers who might not necessarily, be so accessible in the past. So I think there would be some pros there, some really golden opportunities there. But equally, that I think the coming back to the point on the unregulated nature of buy now, pay later, and I think the platform itself really needs to have more punchier, policy makings to stringent, the marketplace, and also to take out whatever those unsustainable, unfair, or those practices, poor practices that we might have seen or read in reports, newspapers, etc.
Hey. Thank you so much. I think this was a very interesting session. I read, obviously, your book chapter, and we had also some talks on buy now, pay later, but I still learned a lot, and it was really interesting for me. So I hope it was also interesting for you. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having us as well. And it's lovely to see so many, lovely colleagues, as well as, across the river, let's say the river, the channel. So hi, Desiree. So really nice. And very nice of your organizer as well, Tobias, to put all of us together. I really, I'm sure that my colleagues also appreciate your efforts and the endeavor that you put in. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, have a nice day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are.
Hopefully
Thank
your
you.
weather
Take care,
isn't too
everyone.
bad now. The temperature-wise is more manageable.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye
Bye-bye.
and good night.
Bye.